Hello and welcome to another episode of Judge of Character. As always, I'm your host, Steve. You know, folks, ever since the unpleasantness a few months ago, I've been really trying to learn how to use this gun. And let me tell you something, being a gunslinger is a lot harder than you think. At least for us normal folk. But for fictional characters, it's as easy as breathing. Especially if you're a badass anime character. That's right, folks, tonight we're looking at another anime character.
It's not because there's been a shortage of anime characters on this show, I promise. Although, that is true. As I mentioned in the last episode, even though anime is considered a genre on its own, it covers a vast amount of other genres. Ghost in the Shell, for example, is what's known as cyberpunk, just one of the many punk genres.
And what's a punk genre? Oh boy, where do I even begin?
Actually, cyberpunk came first in the early 1980s, with the term coming from a short story called Cyberpunk, written by Bruce Bethke. The term was then used to denote the new wave of stories that were coming out that were set in dystopian near futures, where technology was at an all-time high, and society was at an all-time low. This genre would later give birth to memorable stories such as Blade Runner, Akira, and, yes, Ghost in the Shell. As the popularity of cyberpunk grew, something interesting happened. Authors and creators started taking the basic idea and expanding on it, eventually resulting in the creation of steampunk.
And with the birth of steampunk, a whole host of other punk genres started to form, each one taking the ideas of their predecessor and going in a whole variety of different directions with them.
Some examples include dieselpunk, which is like steampunk, only slightly later in the history as far as tech is concerned, ray gun gothic, and even stonepunk. And yes, technically the Flintstones falls under a punk genre. And that's just the historical versions. There's also ocean punk, desert punk, and even cattle punk.
But what does any of that have to do with the character I'm looking at tonight? Well, he's from a show that is very firmly entrenched in the genre of kettle punk. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're going to be looking at Vash the Stampede from the hit anime series Trigun. But what's Trigun?
Trigun, like I just said, is an anime from Japan that is considered cattle punk, or basically steampunk in the Wild West. Except even that's not an accurate description of the show. It's more a mashup of sci-fi, western, steampunk, and space adventure. Frankly, it's a hodgepodge mess of genres, and it works. The show takes place on the planet Gunsmoke and follows the adventures of Vash the Stampede, a legendary outlaw with a bounty of $60 billion on his head. He's also got the reputation of being the most ruthless and despicable being to ever walk the surface of the planet, leaving nothing but death and destruction in his wake. Which isn't actually true, though.
Oh sure, bad luck and destruction follow him like lost little puppies, but it's not intentional on his part.
You see, despite the rumors and the bounty, Vash is actually one of the biggest goofballs and nice guys you'll ever meet. He's just an extraordinary person trying to survive a harsh planet filled with cynical people.
And that's just scratching the surface. Now, Trigun is one of the better known animes out there, especially considering it was one of the flagship shows for Adult Swim back when the block was first starting out on Cartoon Network. You know, back before they tried to cram Seth MacFarlane down our throats. Back when it was good. Now, Trigun has fans of all ages all over the world, and judging by the amount of cosplay of Vash the Stampede, it's pretty obvious he's an awesome character.
Cosplay, the practice of dressing up as a character from a movie, book, or video game, especially one from the Japanese genres of manga and anime.
So that happened. Anyway, let's not waste any more time and dive right into what makes Vash so great. Preferably before whatever that was happens again.
Let's start, as we always do, with a personality, and this reason alone is what makes Vash one of my favorite characters. One of the greater things about anime is that the characters are almost always rich and complex, with multiple facets to their personalities that flesh them out in the most wonderful ways, and Vash is no exception. When the series begins, we're led to believe that Vash is the most insane, badass gunslinger to walk the planet Gunsmoke, a man who wouldn't hesitate to shoot you where you stand. But within 5 minutes of first meeting him, this image is completely shattered, and we're left with a goofy goody two-shoes with an insatiable appetite for donuts and women in that order.
This is memorable for a couple of reasons. First, the complexity is interesting. On the one hand, you have a complete and total goofball who cares more about having fun and being a lecherous pervert than anything else. But on the other hand, when shit gets real, yo, you have an unstoppable badass who will send you home crying to your mama. Secondly, the personality and its multiple angles makes for some really interesting storytelling.
For example, when the show starts, we're introduced to two side characters, Meryl and Millie, two insurance agents for the Bernardelli Insurance Agency. They've been saddled with the task to find Vash and shadow him, all in an attempt to curb the damage he causes. They meet him in the first episode, but are so fooled by his acting like, well, a fool, that they completely ignore him for the next few episodes, thinking that he's just an idiot and a lout. It isn't until the 5th episode, when Vash has to square off against an entire town hell-bent on collecting the bounty on his head, plus a couple of heavy-hitting thugs, that he lives up to his legendary status, and the two insurance girls realize that the idiot is in fact the legendary outlaw.
These first few episodes, plus several that follow, were filled with plenty of humor, all surrounding the goofy antics of this would-be outlaw. While there was plenty of action, the show was definitely more humorous in its early days. But even in those early episodes, we saw plenty of evidence of the other aspect of Vash's personality, that part of him that earned the title The Stampede.
That other part of Vash's personality, the badass, can be summed up in 2 words: focus and control. When Vash is on his A-game, expect to see him dole out damage in the most precise measurements you've ever seen, and in large quantities. This is why people call him Vash the Stampede, the Humanoid Typhoon.
Now, the 2 distinct sides of his personality isn't just great characterization, it's also a great strategy, and therefore another thing that makes the character awesome. Vash plays up his fool tendencies in order to trick people into thinking he's just a harmless idiot and should be completely ignored. And let's be honest, how many of us have ever looked at someone who's acting foolishly and thought, they're a badass?
I'm sure Keaton is dead.
I can't feel my legs. Kaiser.
First thing I learned on the job, you know what it was? How to spot a murderer.
See? Anyway, the fact that he pretends to be an idiot all the time in order to hide his true nature leads me to the next awesome part about him. Because let's face it, you don't get a nickname like the Humanoid Typhoon unless you're some sort of badass, right?
The most obvious aspect here is he's a gunslinger, and as we discussed in the episode on Roland, being a gunslinger naturally means you're a gifted ass-kicker. But here's where Vash differs from other gunslingers. While Vash certainly does have many of the same traits and skills, such as incredible aim and fast reflexes, he uses them differently.
You see, Vash, for all of his skill as a gunslinger, plus the bounty and his reputation, is technically a pacifist. He refuses to kill anyone, ever. Because of this, he has to use his skills differently, and that by itself is interesting in its own right.
Because of his oath not to kill, no matter what, Vash has to fight differently than simply pulling out his gun and pulling the trigger. The first 4 episodes show this brilliantly, with Vash never firing his gun, not even once, until the 5th episode in the show. In the prior episodes, he manages to resolve the situations he finds himself in without having to resort to shooting anyone, whether it was using a ketchup bottle to play dead, or even using rocks to change the trajectory of a bullet so that they don't kill anyone. Even after he starts using the gun regularly, he always uses it to end fights without anyone getting killed.
Now, even though he strives to end things peacefully as often as possible, there are times when Vash has to whip out his gun and be a man! That sounded a lot more perverted than I meant.
What I mean is that just because he's a pacifist doesn't mean Vash doesn't know how to handle his gun.
Get your mind out of the gutter.
Vash is incredibly, almost blindingly fast. Several times he manages to fire off several shots so quick that they sound like a single shot. Other times he himself is able to move so fast, if you blink, you'll miss it. But speed is only one part of it, there's accuracy too, and in Vash's case, it's even more important. Since he tries not to kill, Vash has to aim for non-vital spots, such as the arms and legs, to get the job done.
With all of that combined together, it's easy to see how Vash the Stampede truly is a legendary gunslinger. Which can't be said of me. It made myself sad. Anyway, there's more to the character than just a complex personality and being a badass. There's also... Ow.
Don't you dare open another tab. Judge of Character will be right back. See, I told you this show would come back.
Handy little thing, isn't it? Anyway, as I was saying, one of the other things that makes Vash the Stampede such an awesome character is his voice actor, Johnny Young Bosch.
Many of you might recognize Johnny Young Bosch from his days playing Adam Park on the hit TV series Power Rangers from back in the day.
You remember him. He was the guy that was always getting shafted in the movies.
I'm a frog.
And then there was the second movie where he was given a minivan. A friggin' minivan! That was something that bothered the hell out of me for the longest time. Everybody else on the team got really awesome cars. Tommy got like a fucking race car. The girls got like dune buggies and shit. Hell, even the little kid got a damn Range Rover. The kid that nobody fucking liked got a fucking Range Rover, and Adam got a minivan. Oh god, I can see it now. Aegis, we need you. The world's in danger. Sorry, Zordon, but I gotta go take this annoying little brat to soccer practice. Thanks! God, I hate it. I'm getting off topic, aren't I? Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, while his time on Power Rangers might be what catapulted him to fame and might be what he's most remembered for, his work in voice acting is definitely going to be a close second. Sorry.
And for good reason. Vash has lent his voice to many an anime and video game, including Bleach, Wolf's Rain, and even... Oh, hi, Ghost in the Shell. But of all the roles Vash has voiced, Vash the Stampede was his first, and considered to be his best role.
Not hard to see why. Or is that here? Anyway, Vash does a fantastic job bringing both the goofball qualities and the badass qualities of Vash to life.
In the scenes where Vash is playing up his silly nature, Vash really does sound like a doofus, and I mean that in a nice way. It only helps to sell the moments where Vash, and subsequently Bosch, gets serious. Just listen for a second.
Grandma, what you waiting for? Fill her up! I mean, please fill her up, miss, if you wouldn't mind.
That's better.
You know what, friend? Anyone ever tell you that you lack compassion? Later. Now, please, for the love of God, don't shoot that gun.
While just about any decent voice actor could pull that off, only Bosch does it with a befitting tone. The goofiness and the seriousness all roll together into one believable voice, the voice of Vash the Stampede.
Now there's one last element to cover, and it's what ties everything that I've mentioned before now together. The story itself.
Vash is a complex and compelling character, and his story is one filled with fun, adventure, and tragedy. Over the course of the series, we learn his backstory, how he is a being known as a plant, and how he has a twin brother who wishes to wipe out all humans. We learn of his mentor, Rem Savrim, and how she taught him his pacifistic ideals, as well as how she sacrificed herself to save him and his brother. We see all the trials and tribulations he goes through in order to save as many people as he possibly can, no matter what the cost. And it is a heavy one at that. The scars that cover his body are proof of his dangerous lifestyle. We're lured in by his disarming behavior, and by the time the truth is revealed, we're too invested to turn away. We become involved with his tale so much that when the time comes and Vash finally does kill for the first time, it hits us as hard as it hits him.
This is what makes Vash, and therefore Trigun itself, so great. In fact, to be perfectly honest, my reasons for picking Vash for this show were kinda selfish.
Trigun was the third anime I ever saw, right behind Tenchi Muyo and Samurai Pizza Cats. While those two shows got me involved in anime, Trigun made me a permanent fan. The story it was telling, and the hero it presented, the legendary outlaw with the bounty of $60 billion double dollars, made me see the potential for storytelling that anime had, and that it wasn't just another type of cartoon. It made me realize that anime, while silly looking and certainly goofy at times, could be serious and offer so much more than originally seen.
So in the end, you could argue that Vash the Stampede is a representation of anime itself. It's a mixture of goofy and serious, with a dash of perverted thrown in for good flavor. It's funny and silly, but it can also make you feel, more importantly, it can also make you think. And I think that's more than enough to make a memorable character. Don't you? In any case, I'm your host Steve, reminding all of you to stay in character.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this episode of Judge of Character, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe. And be sure to check out other episodes to see what I have to say about some of your favorite characters. Until next time, everyone, stay wicked.